This podcast is protected under the laws of the United States and other countries. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or exhibition may result in civil liability, criminal prosecution, and the wrath of the tall man.
Boy!
And welcome to the first context and trigger warnings of 90 for Chill, the podcast with CatBus Russ. This is your host, CatBus Russ. Before I get into the episode, I just want to make some statements about what to expect that might, again, offend you. We're talking about the movie Gold Diggers of 1933, so an inevitable Kanye West joke is made. I also end up dropping the F-bomb, kind of, sort of. I really wish I had the time to go and do a proper edit, throw my smegs in there, but two jobs and pulling this episode out of my butt thanks to the Poetic Critic. You gotta take what you get, but I still think we're definitely PG-13 this week. Well, it's weird because it was a mother, and I don't know if I've ever really seen that word heard in a PG-13 rated movie. I guess that was the only F-bomb in the original cut, or the theatrical cut of Live Free or Die Hard. Hey, I'm up there with Bruce Willis. Thank God I still have my mind, I suppose.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Bring the noise.
Thanks again for coming to 90 for Chill, the podcast. This is your host, CatBus Russ, or should I say 90 for Chill, the podcast with CatBus Russ. Regardless, if you want your Amazon Echo or Google Nest device to play this podcast, just ask it to play 90 for Chill, the podcast with CatBus Russ, and I think that'll get you there. Or you could ask it to play podcast by Russ Stevens, and it should get you there too. But let's just get on to the show. This week, I've got to bring back the Poetic Critic. We're going to talk about Gold Diggers of 1933, which was kind of inspired by listening to the Junk Filter podcast, which featured one of my older sister's good internet acquaintances, Jessica Ritchie, at Ruby_Stevens on Twitter, where they discussed the downfall of musicals, I should say roadshow musicals, with comparing it to comic book movies now. So we are going to work through that, maximalist versus minimalist cinema. But before we get into all that, we're going to discuss, I guess, what film Twitter is saying about the Super Mario Brothers, the movie. Basically, we're going to have a discussion about, does it have to be something for adults, I guess, is what it is. Like, I say personally go back to Super Mario Brothers 1993. I think adults can get that movie, and I do offer ways of getting through that movie. So, I will quickly just say, if you want to be on the show, always looking for guests, send an email to rustthebus07@gmail.com. That's RUSSTHEBUS07@gmail.com. Offer me a movie, theme, director, actor. As long as you focus on sub 100-minute movies, we're going to have a slice of fried gold. So, I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with the Poetic Critic. And, again, just offer me suggestions on what to do next. Thanks again for coming to 90 for Chill, the podcast.
My army! Soon we will destroy the Mushroom Kingdom!
Nervous?
I fear nothing.
You want to do this? It is on like Donkey Kong! Cool raccoon suit! Really? Not at all! Buckle up!
Here we go!
Only in theaters April 5th. Rated PG.
So this will be an interesting episode of 90 for Chill, the podcast with CatBus Russ, because this is new experience for me, and I don't know really how to handle it. So with that, I have the Poetic Critic here. The movie we'll be discussing was probably mentioned in the introduction. That will be placed before this, being The Gold Diggers of 1933, the third adaptation of The Gold Diggers, a Broadway play that I think that ran from 1917 to 1920, if I did my research correctly. One of these adaptations was a silent movie, so this is a real interesting project. And But before we get to that, Rory's just reviewing the world according to Kent Brockman, with Donald Trump being indicted the same day of the wicked Barbie trailer. I do not know what to make of this movie, but we're gonna. I don't like to give her much praise, but I guess Jessica Ritchie was right in her meme of Kent Brockman talking about a doll for 20.
It wasn't her.
Well, she shared it, and it's just. We'll get into my disagreements with Jessica Ritchie eventually. Just based off. This comes from her, and it's mentioned on the C2E2 roundup of listening to her on the Junk Filter podcast. And I'll get to all that, but so we got Barbie, we got Trump, and but Rory wants to bring up the Mario discourse. I didn't know it came out this week. I still got to get around the John Wick 4. John Wick does qualify for 90 for Children podcast, hence the entire franchise does.
No, it doesn't. The fourth movie is over 2.5 hours long.
Hey, once you make a great movie, you can do whatever the heck you like. If you want to talk about Kickboxer Resurgence, the sequel to Kickboxer Vengeance, which qualifies. Yes, give me the Mountain and Christopher Lambert. Yes, they deserve that 20 extra minutes. You gotta earn it, is all I'm saying. Rory was basically discussing how the video game nerds are pissing on children.
Well, not video game nerds so much as more professional critics and amateur commentators.
Well,
so I'm sure that includes some of the nerds. But the complaint, I haven't seen the movie, and I'm not particularly interested in the movie. I'm kind of outgrown that kind of animated feature at this point. And
I will suggest giving Super Mario Bros. 1993 a chance. Just ignore the fact that, well, one, drink like John Leguizamo and Bob Hopkins did during the filming of that feature, and two, ignore the entire relationship to the video game franchise.
Well, I was going to say...
And stick around for the Super Koopa Cousins Adventures pitch. What you were going to say.
Well, it's funny to see how this movie's had this gigantic opening weekend. Especially given that you don't really associate big opening weekends with Easter and spring break so much.
No, you don't.
No. And these days. But that it's really enjoyed this huge opening weekend. And undoubtedly there will be a sequel. I mean, if there's any franchise that was practically to the manner born to have sequels, it's one that really didn't become iconic until several games in, if you count the old Donkey Kong games.
Well, now I have to watch it just because, are they going, did they use all the suits?
I don't think they used all the suits, although they did work in the raccoon, I believe.
Yeah, but screw the raccoon. If he's not full-blown Tanuki, it's not great. I need to go and look for spoilers just so... No, he doesn't do the Tanuki suit. Does he do the kitty suit?
Yes, I believe he does the kitty suit. But...
And when are we going to get Mario in an accurate Tanuki suit?
In any case, the reviewers, there are some of this is casual comments, some of this is professional comments, like there was one column in IndieWire in particular that's been talked up a bit. It has to do with the fact that the movie is clearly not grandly ambitious in terms of the plot or the characters. It's called the Super Mario Brothers movie, and it does not aspire to be much more than a Super Mario Brothers basic gameplay translated into a 92-minute movie with credits.
Dang, that does make it sound like a short movie, since credits these days run 10 minutes.
Yeah, run as far as 10 minutes. I'm always trying to remember that in my head when I look at the run times for some of these movies, but in any case, it's a... And I looked at the synopsis of Wikipedia. It is pretty straightforward. And some a lot of critics seem unhappy that the movie didn't try to be ambitious in a way that we associate with, say, Pixar, Disney, although Disney, that's really highly debatable, or Studio Ghibli, as if it's now a crime that you just make a kids movie for kids and are not concerned with trying to appeal to the 30 and 40-year-olds in the audience.
Well, my stance is that with so many video game systems, I mean, it's 2023. It took 5.5 years before my niece and nephew got a Nintendo Switch. That meant they've spent 5.5 years, half of John's life, not being exposed to Super Mario Brothers.
And that's a whole different conversation.
Well, but that's where
indoctrinating kids into brand loyalty. I wish I could remember who said it, but this goes back to the 1980s, really, when
the toys
and branding became a much bigger deal than they were before.
Yeah, screw that liberal Congress that made us put that IE in the corner of TV shows on Saturday mornings.
But saying that it's a movie that will make kids happy, but not so much adults. And there are many kids' movies over the years that fell into this territory and are frustrating. They're the ones that tend not to be embraced as classics years later. The cream rises to the top eventually.
You see, for me, it's like, okay, most painful YouTube review I ever did was for Twilight. Gave it 2.5 stars. Hated it. But I know it met the audience. And I say give the audience, as long as you nail your audience, I think it's all right. I've definitely seen movies that batter the audience, and that's wrong. Twilight is a cursed Krusty doll. Oh, this is something for the tweens. That's good. Oh, this is the stuff you don't want tweens thinking about. That's bad. But we get the Muse song. That's good. But we have to make them ruin America's pastime to play said song. That's bad. So, did Renfield come out yet, or is that next week?
That hasn't come out yet.
Okay, it's just they're really pushing up the ad campaign now, and then you got Sisu, a lot of YouTube commercials telling me to watch the trailer for that movie. So, but no, I'm just saying, kids get kids stuff. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
and if you appreciate your children, you will appreciate it when they get their stuff.
As Gene Siskel once said, a film that aims low should not be praised for hitting that target. And I see the point he has there. If the movie only is going to entertain 4-year-olds, then it's probably not going to have a lot to offer for other people. There is something to be said for real craftsmanship in any form of art, especially art aimed at children. I don't begrudge anyone who feels that way. At the same time, though, with art aimed at children, you do have to accept that if an adult doesn't like it and a kid does, that's probably okay too. We all had our experiences as kids taking our parents. I'm not just talking about yours and mine, but the parent in general, the mass parent, having to take their kids to something like the Care Bears movie.
Hey, I still dug the Care Bears movie when I went and did my animation television to TV to feature animation episode, which I know that technically didn't qualify. The movie became before the series. I was 5.
There was, in the 80s, we had a lot of kids' movies like this. Now, though, like the Transformers movie.
You see, I would say the Transformers movie wasn't like that because we went on a killing spree to start the movie off. This has encouraged much of Robert Kirkman's writing for The Walking Dead.
I will say that movie was trying to be more ambitious in an adolescent manner. I will grant you that. You know, and I understand the frustration you have with these highly branded productions that are ultimately just another cog in the merchandising. If anything, picking in particular on the Super Mario Brothers animated movie for being that, though, seems weird when I remember how a lot of professional critics gave too much slack to the Beauty and the Beast remake back in 2017, because it's really not that different when you think about it. It's just another piece of merchandise off of the original work. Granting that the Beauty and the Beast story, of course, was adapted in public domain fairy tale that has had multiple iterations over the centuries.
No, I would say there's still a difference between that because you still had a product. I mean, really, who thinks these live-action Disney movies is a great way to move merchandise besides for the accountants? Because I don't think they move merchandise. I have not seen... I want to dress up like, basically, so we ruined Hermione cosplay. Everybody knows, no, that's just somebody trying to mix both features now at C2E2. I mean, sorry, it's one or the other. You look like Belle from the cartoon. Dark hair, get your hair pulled back. Or you look like Hermione. I mean, I haven't seen the crossover there, so... I'm just saying, like, it moves a lot of movie tickets, but I don't think it moves a lot of merchandise.
No, not direct merchandise based on the remake itself.
Now, while this event, I could see that moving money, doing it.
Because a lot of people are real give Maleficent more of a pass for understandable reasons. It was an alternative perspective on the material.
Yes.
But with Beauty and the Beast and the other live-action remakes in general, it's less of an issue of the movie having any merit in and of itself, but it's something that keeps the larger brand of the original animated feature going. And that's what I mean by moving the merchandise.
Yeah, I guess I haven't bid on it, so I pay it no mind, so I guess it's bloody harmless. Unless you're Martin Scorsese.
Well, I remember...
That's what we need. Marty's perspective on a Disney cartoon. Come on, Marty.
Now,
It's called synergy.
If anything...
Emphasis on the sin.
If anything, the cynicism and pandering that goes into the Disney live-action remakes, I find less honest than the simple approach that a studio like Illumination would take to their productions.
Yeah, I just can't say I've seen much Illumination that's really impressed me.
Well, Illumination is kind of in the position DreamWorks was in for a while, and that DreamWorks was accused of making a lot of money off of very lightweight, churned out fare that wasn't really trying to advance the art of animation in particular.
Well, I mean, let's see, what was it? SKG, Spielberg, Geffen, and Katzenberg. Well, just Katzenberg pretty much started by ripping off animation style and stories, if you refer to ants, from Disney. I mean, would you rather do light fare or just try to be Disney light, I suppose?
That's a way of looking at it. Illumination doesn't really try that hard to be Pixar, from what I can gather. I haven't seen a ton of their work either. Although I did really enjoy the original Despicable Me.
Oh no, it's a solid movie. I think it feels like it runs long. which is...
I sometimes wonder if the fact that that is a French-based studio affects the pacing issues.
It
French
could.
animation there was fairly thriving animation industry in France. It doesn't get talked about much.
Well,
G-Kids has imported some of the films that come out of that
no,
industry.
Nocturne.
Ernest at Celestine.
Yeah.
Which is a wonderful movie. April and the Twisted World. G-Kids has imported a bunch of them a lot. I mean, G-Kids is best known probably for their anime imports, but...
Yeah, but when you know it, again, we're talking about Illumination, and then it's like, oh, and G-Kids, which is basically owned by the Comcast Universal Group.
I don't know.
I think they are, because I think it was Universal who bought because this used to be the old Pioneer anime label. It went from Pioneer to Geneon, then Universal Geneon, which is probably why they got the G.
It could be.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it's still French cartoons distributed by Comcast. That's just an observation more than anything.
Well, but I think that Illumination has kind of cornered the market in recent years on high concepts that sell to kids and families. I mean, the Sing movies were both gigantic hits.
I don't know, and you have Trolls.
No, that was DreamWorks.
Oh, wow. They're, again, all under the Comcast Universal umbrella.
Doesn't have a ton of different properties. I mean, they've relied very heavily on the Despicable Me from there, the Minions.
But what I'm just saying is, since Warner Brother has their own animation department, I guess everything goes through Universal or Disney now. I mean, what was the Versus the Machine movie? Because I presume that was probably Sony. Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, for me, I guess I'm not as cynical as I think I am. I am able to put myself in the kid's perspective. That's the only reason I'd ever want children, is so I can have somebody to play toys with. Darn right, yeah, we're going to open up these WWE figures. Oh yeah, I could resell them for money, but no. Toys are meant to be played with. That's why I love Funko Pops, because, no, they're like the original My Little Ponies. I think it was Hal Sparks, or was it Michael Ian Black, or maybe even Donald Logue?
Well, when I love the 80s,
yes.
It was My Little Equestrian Statue, yes.
Yes.
But
I almost went and made that huge investment in the Funko Pop My Little Pony toys, the original ones. Like,
they didn't do anything for me.
No, but it was just the idea. Yes, I have the best of both worlds.
But Illumination has done these really high concept, very simple, easy to explain ideas for movies.
Yes, let's rip off the Muppets movie.
Well, who hasn't by this point? If you
I'm actually saying no, and that actually is an observation we'll get in. I want to use for our main event. No, I'm just saying, as in, I'm talking about in Sing as in ripping off the Muppets, not the Muppet movie. The Muppets, a feature from what, 2011?
Yes.
Yes. Gosh, you had to give so many people a break when their kids ordered that movie when I was doing customer service for MediaCom.
What do you mean?
Look, I did not order the Muppets. It was my child. I got them the DVD. I don't know how this ended up. All right, this is a one-time forgiveness. And my DVR's not working. Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm going to have to transfer you over here. So, okay. No, I would take a shot at fixing your DVR. It's usually on you, and it's usually as simple as the classic IT solution. Have you tried unplugging it and plugging it back in again? So, Yeah, I guess, as I say, I can put myself into the place of a child. I still have that whimsy, which is probably something that might be detected on my dating profiles, and hence why I haven't gotten much action.
What I'm trying to say is I can do that too, but I do feel that it's almost more honest to just do a simple movie that kids are going to enjoy, as opposed to what I think Disney does, at least with the live-action remakes and going by something like Frozen. Sometimes they're animated features of movies that pretend to be mature and more universal in their appeal when they really aren't.
Well, so I guess this is really, to wrap it up, where does this really put you on the Mario discourse?
Well, I'm of two minds. I do think it's important that kids have high-quality entertainment that they can enjoy. But like all of us, kids aren't always going to be in the mood to engage with a high-functioning experience as it is, dealing with the great challenges of life. The way that some Pixar movies, certainly prime years of Spielberg, if you can even say they ended, or the best Studio Ghibli films do. Kids do like to... Some people on Twitter were commenting, the kids have it hard these days, when you really think about it. Active shooter drills, constant bad news, doom and gloom about the environment.
Okay, so you want to put them through Nausicaa Valley of the Wind to really, see, you're going to have to fix this, too.
Exactly. You don't have to push them on that all the time. If a kid wants to enjoy dessert, you should make sure they get a balanced diet of fresh fruits and veggies, but they deserve their desserts too. If they want to see the Mario movie and they really enjoy the Mario movie, then I say let them have it.
See, now I'm just, again, when you say kids eat their vegetables. I didn't eat my vegetables, I'm fine. And chicken nuggets are eternal. As in, excellent taste. That little tempura batter on that little piece of chicken, of compressed chickens. I really do think it's those little videos you see online of chicks being devoured in mulching machines. And then cut to the kids cheering. No, I mean, I guess I'm just way too much like a kid, because it's nuggets are still awesome. Why are people pushing boneless wings down our throats? The nugget was perfect. I'm going to keep eating my nuggets. That's where I'm at. It's you know how difficult it is to tell a Studio Ghibli-like story. And John Lasseter, sorry to bring up that twat, you'd probably agree with me. It's these are really constructed stuff. They're not kids' movies, I would even go and venture to say. And I think that's Disney. I think that's Disney's problem, is that the kid is the number one focus, hence why their films think about the parents second and don't hold up as well now.
I think that does a disservice to a film like My Neighbor Totoro. It is a wonderful movie for children, to the point that it is also a fine film for adults. It's simply that entertaining and artfully constructed. Good. And then...
Okay, you want to talk about vegetables and dessert. Let's go to the original intended My Neighbor Totoro experience.
Famously, this movie in Japan was a double bill with Ghibli's saddest and darkest film, Grave of the Fireflies, partially because it was seen as a sort of palate cleanser after how heavy Grave of the Fireflies was.
Yeah, so I mean...
It does seem like an unusual way to release a film, though one must keep in mind that in other countries what is seen, what topics can be broached with children and which cannot, is sometimes significantly different.
Yes, that's true, but again, Miyazaki, especially with My Neighbor Totoro,
or even something. Another comparison might be how many people responded to Ponyo in this country when it was given the English language translation and dub. It seemed there was some pretty confused responses to it in the wake of coming, right after stuff like Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away. Because Ponyo really is a children's movie. It runs on complete, almost nonsense logic.
But here's the thing, and I'm going back to at least how
the little fishy almost caused the apocalypse.
Yeah, but I'm going back to the Hayao Miyazaki
Just once pointed that out.
And I thought about getting a cat and naming it Ponyo just so I could say Ponyo, little kitty in the sea. She's a little cat with a big belly.
Cats love water. That's a terrible name for a kitten if you're looking at it that way.
No, because it's going to get fat, which is fat, and you get to sing about its belly, like they sing about the fish.
I know.
But no, what I'm saying is I think Miyazaki is regardless of the story, which goes back to Howl's, is writing his own story. And I think it's to entertain himself. He just happens to be very open-minded and dealing with everything he had to deal with growing up. Hence why he probably said, yeah, put it after the World War II movie. I'm just saying, I think he's just not a childlike director, but I think he appreciates telling children's stories. I think that's where we're on a disconnect. It's like he's telling his own stories, but he wants everybody to understand it. And Walt Disney does not take that kind of approach. They basically...
No, that's not a fair statement. Many of the most beloved Disney movies, particularly in the 1930s and 40s, knew that they had to be entertaining to an adult audience just to push the idea that audiences would sit for a full-length animated feature. There weren't a ton of those, certainly not in this country at the time.
But then I would say still, we didn't have to worry about crappy kids animation until the 1980s, well, the 70s, because Hanna-Barbera would just put out anything. No, then I'm saying it's strictly an 80s kind of concept then that started it. Again, the toy line stuff.
Toy tie-ins, of course, have existed.
Toy tie-ins have, but Transformers, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony,
the cartoons, much more industrialized.
That's what I'm saying. The cartoons became
not least because of what happened with Star Wars.
Yes, but I'm just saying they were made. Those three cartoon series were made to move toys, strictly merchandise. So that's where I'm like, Care Bears. Yes, I like that movie. And I want to see Care Bears 2 again, and I want to see the third one that you can't see. I want to see Rainbow Bright and the Starcatchers. Screw you, Netflix. We better make our own content. No, you were my video store.
This brings me, though, to the last reason why I'm sort of two minds about the Mario discourse. You forget that even a low-budget, relatively uninspired movie can be as sparking to the imagination of the right child as any of the high art examples. When I was that young, you don't differentiate quality necessarily. Part of it is just getting out to the movie is the experience in and of itself. You're not necessarily going to care what you see. But I remember in the mid-'80s, when I look back now as I catch up with many of the canonical titles, there were many like The Goonies or Gremlins or Explorers that I didn't see at the time, which I couldn't have seen, and which I wasn't necessarily interested in because I was fairly timid.
Yeah, Explorers, that was basically more of, Mom's not going to take us to see a sci-fi movie.
Well, that's probably true. But I'm just using it as an example. What But what we did go see, where we saw a lot of the toy-based
Yes.
movies, we saw
Rainbow Bright, the Starcatcher,
Star Stealer.
Right. See, that's why I need to see this movie again. Care Bears 1, 2, and 3. My Little Pony, Transformers.
Well, we also would see the Disney reissues, and
Yeah.
we saw the Muppet movies. Not the Creature Shop movies, but we did see the Muppet movies.
Right. Again, that's something like
And
mom wouldn't get.
I still have a deep fondness for relatively simple stuff like Sesame Street Presents Falling
No,
Apart.
it's, yes, again, it's Muppets,
It's not as-
essentially.
Sophisticated as the mainline Muppet movies, but still quite intelligent and witty. As is what I recently got around
Yes,
to.
I saw that.
You saw in Letterboxd that I really enjoyed the Elmo and Grouchland movie, a film that is unapologetically a kids movie, but is very, very, very good at being a children's movie.
Here's where it all comes together with Super Mario Brothers, the movie, is that we had an entire not really our parents, the boomers are a little too old, but the Gen Xers, they got Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And and I'm a Gen Xer, but the millennials grew up on Mario. So I'm just saying why there's a built-in fondness for these properties, because the generation prior was. So basically what I'm saying is I think the problem is the Mario discourse is, I say, goes back to the nerd element, is like, we were pumped to finally get our Mario movie. Screw 1993, which again was a problematic because those parents did not grow up on Mario Brothers. And now they want something ambitious, and it's like, no, this is for your kids. You like Mario the same way they like Mario, or you should. And if you don't, you're being a douche. There we go. That's my discourse.
I was trying to say that we also should not underestimate the potential for kids to latch on to movies that otherwise aren't treated as cool or high art or even good, even when they grow older. The movie I keep coming back to from the 80s, and we've discussed this movie before, is Santa Claus the Movie from 1985. I'm still inordinately fond of that movie, even for myriad flaws it has and how strange it is.
Yeah, John Lithgow is Superman at the end. How else do you breathe in space? There we go.
He was in the Phantom Zone. They talked about this on the audio commentary.
Well, there you go. Why? There we go. Like,
but it is
James Gunn. You would appreciate that. Bring us John Lithgow out of the Phantom Zone.
Now, as I was saying, as flawed as that movie is, and as strange as it is, though no stranger than Rainbow Bright and the Star Stealer, which came out the same month.
Same month.
Yeah.
I know both bombs.
Well, Rainbow Bright just didn't do much business at all. Santa Claus the movie,
cheaper to make, hence no money lost.
Right. Santa Claus the movie actually did substantially better at the box office than most of the other kids' movies of 1985. But like The Black Cauldron from that same year, it wasn't nearly enough to make up the budget.
Yeah.
So it's all relative. But a lot more people saw it than, say, they did Labyrinth, for instance, or Young Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I think.
Or Explorers. Or the Sesame Street movie.
Okay, that's surprising about the Sesame Street movie. I mean, I still follow. Yeah,
okay-ish,
but no, those.
I mean, it stuck around a while.
Yeah, I think it. Look, I think it wasn't until Pixar did we really have parents who took the time to. I don't know what. Geez, I don't really know what the deal was. Like, wouldn't you? Okay, Explorers, Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, I think the problem with those features is that parents may have been a little too... didn't have enough faith in their children to totally understand it. If they leave the movie disappointed and you, like, had fun, well, then it was still a lost trip.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Well, it's like...
But...
I mean, how many times did I was sadly the adult with all my friends in the 2001. Oh, Swordfish, man, yeah! This is absolute garbage, and Halle Berry's boobs didn't save it. They wasted Vinnie Jones. That is unforgivable. If you cast Vinnie Jones in a movie, you best not waste him.
Yes. Well.
But that's what yeah.
It's weird that we can come down so hard on kids' movies.
Well,
and not keep in mind that they, like any other form of movie, can be loved for all their flaws in a way that movies aimed at adults are. It's a complicated situation.
I don't want to say yeah, until we watch the movie, I don't want to say give it a pass because it's a kids movie.
Right.
I mean, but as a person who's played Mario video games since 1989, yeah, we were a little slow to get the Nintendo. Actually, that was probably me and you being contrarians about what system we should get. That Mom and Dad didn't have to worry about actually getting a system. You were all Nintendo and Zelda. I was all Rambo 3 and Sega. I might just be a contrarian to begin with, because did you know anybody who owned a Master System?
I don't know. What I'm saying in the end is that with kids' movies, it's okay to hold them up to a reasonable standard of criticism as you would any adult movie, but you shouldn't act like it's the end of the world if it didn't entertain you, but entertains kids.
Right. Well, it's not the end of the world, but I'm just saying, like I guess I'm saying, yeah, give it a pass, because couldn't you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you know? And as a society, we don't like to do that. So, yes, I blame you, society. And I just feel like going back to The Simpsons' Dr. Hibbert. I don't know how to solve this case. Do you?
Well, I guess I have to. I mean, that's my job, right?
Right. All right, so you need a bathroom break, anything?
Yeah, I need a drink.
Okay.
90 for Chill, the podcast, proudly presents to you Allie's Accessories Shop on Etsy's Trash Feature Review.
This toast is burnt. Fire me.
How long have you and your wife been together?
19 years.
Wow!
You must be doing something right.
Mama burned dinner again.
Whoa, 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 whoa. You're going to the prom like that?
I think he looks fantastic.
He can't go dressed like a hustler.
2 kids?
3. My father-in-law's the youngest.
I don't even like him.
That's a lot of gin you consumed.
It's better if you keep it in the freezer.
It's better if you don't drink it.
Come on, people. We have 5 shocking moments in every script. We only have 3.
My boss is very unpredictable.
How often do you and your wife have sex?
Not as often as I'd like.
Script doesn't work. Want something unexpected?
I'll find something.
Find it with Robin. She's going to help you.
It'll be fun. We can work at my place.
Who'd you dance with?
Do you mind if we not talk about this? Because I had a good time. I'd rather not wreck it.
I say we swim before we work.
You're very good at this.
So are you. You just need to listen to that voice inside.
You've been married a gazillion years. You must be bored senseless. What do you want to do?
I can see that what's happening here is a huge downer for you. Not quite the party you were hoping for. Maybe there's a better one happening somewhere else.
It's hard, isn't it? Parents, children, being married.
The picnic on the beach was kind of fun, actually.
That's a switch. You actually like him.
I can't do this alone, Ned.
At least I'm not stuck in a bad marriage.
I never said it was a bad marriage.
I thought fun is what you were missing.
Me too. You're gonna find someone just right for you. I promise. They're good, your boys. They're beautiful.
I'm very lucky.
Sometimes luck has nothing to do with it.
So I've just concluded watching Every Day from 2010 with starring Liev Schreiber, Helen Hunt, Carla Gugino, Susie Eddie Izzard, and Brian Dennehy. Ezra Miller also, seemingly very creepy, not really creepy, which is just weird. It's just his ambiguous vibe he offers. I guess it goes all the way back to 2010. I remember it. Well, I mean, obviously, probably got him the Fantastic Beasts franchise, and then in turn that entire Trainwreck bit. That's about all I can really say about Ezra Miller, is that he's always going to play characters that just don't seem normal, which is not good for this feature because that means he's gay. This feature is about Liev Schreiber just trying to make sense of every day, being married to Helen Hunt, 2 kids. Helen Hunt's bringing his father, who's pretty much on the way out, to live with them. Basically, he's just feeling like there's something missing in his life. And his job is writing for some, I guess you'd probably say HBO or Showtime show involving a lot of just weird sex humor. It's produced by Izzard, who just wants ridiculousness and pretty much makes our straight-laced protagonist team up with the out there pretty young thing, Carla let me read the box. Carla Gugino. It's Italian, so best I can do. It's not really, there's nothing to hate about it. I mean, it's just rather dull, another man just trying to figure out how to get his life together if it needs to be gotten together. It's kind of like, this is something you want to show, like, a girlfriend in a crappy or dull relationship, to show her, this is how guys are, and how really, we do stupid things, but we're really good people type thing. It's like Lifetime for men, essentially. I think it just, as I say, it's nothing hateable. It was written and directed by Richard Levine. It's just, why, I guess. It's just very much, especially, again, it's just basically, trying to justify the stupid things men will do. And kind of justify them, because look how crazy your life is with a dying father-in-law, a gay son who's trying to figure himself out and be a part of the scene. Your white, the entire thing of trying to get the attention of the wife, and, all the craziness that can be offered by your coke and marijuana-fueled writing partner. It's got some good performances. Izzard's good in it. Liev Schreiber is more of a character actor, which is what I like him in, but he's solid. You can't be angry at any of the performances, I guess, is what I'm saying. I like Brian Dennehy to be Brian Dennehy, not some dying guy. And I know he made it another 10 years, but it's like, he's the guy who went toe-to-toe with Rambo. It's nothing that I'm going to go and rewatch, but as I say, it's an inoffensive piece. In other words, it's more of just the premise of just trying to justify poor decisions by men in scenarios where they shouldn't, where, you got to think about the commitment. So, I don't know. This is coming from a guy who's single, no interest in ever getting married. So again, just proves that the audience is not very large for this feature.
What did I let you think? I told you I had a great show, and I have. It's always the way. I got the show, I got the music, I got the cast, I got the theater, all rearing to go, and it's the old story. Money.
I'm not kidding. I'll give him the money. He'll have it in his office at 10:30 tomorrow morning.
Where are you going to get $15,000?
We'll make those guys pay for their fun. Right through the checkbook.
Underneath your...
What do you know about me underneath?
Huh?
I know what you mean, you old sugar. You watch out, I'm falling in love with you. And oh boy, when love comes at my age, guess who?
Arrest him. What's holding up the show? Why aren't you out there doing your number? Do you want to ruin me?
Oh, Brad, what are we going to do?
Alright, so bathroom breaks have been taken. Just a number one for me because of the hot dogs and macaroni and cheese for Dad's celebration of 75 years. We'll probably keep the back end taken care of. Goofy.
He's keeping it classy, folks.
Hey, that could still be TVG. Which is kind of weird, because that's my first note about the Gold Diggers of 1933.
It's just Gold Diggers of 1933.
Oh, sorry.
I know people hate grammar.
No, that's... It's just one of those weird ones. Well, yeah, no, Kanye was right. Just keep it as Gold Diggers. Ooh, now, that's keeping it classy. No. But the Gold Diggers of 1933. It is the Smashing Pumpkins, not Smashing Pumpkins. If we're gonna get into grammar, sorry. I brought up that my entire bathroom discussion and still TVG, which is kind of weird when I get Alicia Malone mentions in her introduction for the Gold Diggers in 1933 that conveniently placed coins in the opening number. And it's like, that is not, again, this goes back to our discussion, I think, about Arthur and the sheer fact that the moment you bring prostitutes into it, this is not a parental guidance suggested. This is, don't let your kids watch the movie about hookers. With hookers, I should say. And, I go on about that and that, man, I need more show tunes at the strip club just so I can see the coin kind of dancing and such. So, yeah, but this was pre-code.
Yes.
So that's the, and we'll get into the darker elements of that. But,
well, first, how many pre-codes have you seen? For those unaware of the definition.
Not a lot of domestic movies, and I'll be upfront about that. Okay. Angels and Dirty Faces. As I say, most of them come, I've seen Battleship Potemkin, but that doesn't have to worry about the code, nor did M.
Code was established at the turn of the 1930s in Hollywood.
1936, I think.
No. It's a little more complicated than that. The code was initiated around the turn of the 1930s, but was not stringently enforced until around the end of 1934, if I remember correctly. Thus, films of the early 30s are often referred to as pre-code as being not stringently enforced, they were able to get away with quite a bit. After the code went into active enforcement, it remained in place well into the 1960s, but filmmakers from Alfred Hitchcock with films like Psycho, and from there the increasing importation of films from other countries, especially Britain in particular.
No, see, I thought it was more from
the growing popularity of films like the James Bond pictures or Antonioni's Blow Up was a controversial title on release.
No, I was thinking more of how Valley of the Dolls brought in the fact that our Sharon Tate character had to go over to France and Sweden and show her boobs to go and get any kind of press back home.
Right, the importation of more explicit content from Europe in particular. But even films like the James Bond movies had a hand in breaking down the code's restrictions as they took off in this country. And the general collapse of the studio system as a whole, which led to our flawed rating system of today.
And that's kind of ironic that you bring up James Bond and then come from Britain, thank you. And what's your response? The video nasties. I'm just saying, ironic.
Standards changed very quickly with the collapse of the Hays Code and the implementation of rating systems, along with more explicit American content. It had a direct fate in the hand of what happened to Hammer films in the 70s. Hammer movies were fairly explicit for their day, but once the ratings code came in, they seemed a lot less so. In any case, pre-code films are generally seen as the roughly 1930 through 34. And
there is a good documentary that you could probably see if you subscribe to AMC Plus or IFC Plus. Indie Sex. I've got it on DVD, but it's pretty good history about at least the sexual elements. Like, get to see the original Tarzan stuff. Yay.
The Hays Code, of course, didn't just apply to what some would call prurient content, but it also applied to depictions of also regulated depictions of law enforcement, clergy.
The man with the golden arm, just saying something like, and the comic books had the same problem as well.
When they had to wait till the 1950s for the crackdown to come in, but they dealt with the Comics Code Authority.
Yeah.
But pre-code films were...
Spider-Man can't be an intervention. Sorry. Pre-code films were.
Pre-code films can be very surprisingly rowdy and really enjoyable by modern standards, and it's especially in the DVD era, I think, was what really led to a lot of the older titles getting excavated or reevaluated as if they weren't already widely available. And Criterion Channel has done 2 programs now. They did one last year, and they've done one again this year with a somewhat different lineup of titles of Paramount's pre-codes. Paramount in particular had some very lively pre-code movies, including their handful of forays into horror films, which are not as well known as the famous Universal titles of this period, but in some cases is good. And they also did a handful of ones that qualify as backstage musicals. And Warner Brothers did a lot to popularize the musical in the early 30s, along with the gangster film. And
I've got an observation about that.
General urban aesthetic to their films at a time when the musical was a fast-growing genre at the top of the 30s, now that sound was becoming common. And especially the backstage musical, as it's commonly called.
So,
Gold Diggers of 1933 was one of the many innovative productions that featured Busby Berkeley staged dance and production numbers, and was not the only one he did in 1933. The other big one he did that year was 42nd Street. The studio system was notoriously efficient.
I will acknowledge Ginger Rogers is so TCM's doing their celebration of 100 years of Warner Brothers, and that's hence the Alicia Balone introduction, where you can watch the Brad Menton if you as like a special feature on Watch TCM app on the Apple TV. But they were bringing it up like, oh, we're following up our Cagney with another contracted player and Ginger Rogers. And I really do kind of dig this one just because Ginger Rogers really only has the We're in the Money song and then nothing really else in the movie. I mean, she gets to kind of play as a wannabe gold digger, but, good old Trixie prevents that.
Yeah, the other, for that matter, talking about the contract players, the other big Berkeley musical in 1933 is Footlight Parade, and Cagney top lines that one.
Yes, that was...
Features in the final of the 3 extended mini musicals that take up the back stretch of the movie.
You see, that's, again, another thing about the TCM, is like they immediately they basically cut the entire block or this. And that was Gold Diggers of 1933, and now we go into our next music with James Cagney as the up front.
Yeah.
Like, okay, but yeah, this is. Are you gonna automatically? I hate autoplay on streaming apps, so don't do that to me. So, and again, that's another one of those confusing things. Like I saw it recently. Like I'm going through Disney Plus. Like Turning Red. What do you mean an hour 43? No. That was 100 minutes. And it's like, oh yeah, now you got to put all those little bonus features and everything, just like pad it out. But when it comes to the musicals, again with the introduction by Malone, it was basically saying musicals were the attempt of this very masculine studio, basically trying to appeal to women.
Makes sense.
Okay, I was just
sense. Well, it's an interesting way to put it. I've never heard.
Well, I'm just saying that was just what they said there.
Yeah.
With that saying about musicals, it's like, and women and little sisters who will not turn off frickin' Grease. That I may have toned a lot of that movie out because I cannot remember Vi from Grease, which. So it's kind of like, so that would have been Joan Blondell. Like there was an ice cream shop waitress who got decent billing because that was something like looking through trying to find this. Like I can't find it on HBO Max. I'll try Siri, and it pops it up. Yeah, you can rent this on iTunes or Vudu, and then they show a description of it, and they bring up. Joan Blondell being in Grease is the big thing. Yeah. And this features she's Carol who, like, well, we can go further. I got notes. So, yeah. I'm really interested to see the silent version of this feature.
Well, it's lost.
It didn't surprise me. But, talking about, obviously, Busby Berkeley, he gets grander build than Harry Warren and Al Dubin. I do appreciate the joke in the movie where they're getting... So, Gold Diggers starts with a play that immediately gets shut down just before... Because nobody has money in the Depression to actually fund musicals. So, our producer... So, you have our 3 main... starlets living together in a New York apartment, very much behind on rent, but the producer's still trying to come up with something, and says he's got a show lined up. He just needs the money, and they run into a brilliant pianist. Sorry, now I'm having flashbacks to the organist joke on Family Guy, but and songwriter Brad Roberts, played by Dick Powell, and insists that he has to do he needs to do the music, and he's willing to fund the production. But how the heck does he have $15,000 living in a $25 a month apartment in New York? So there's a lot of fishiness, and it's eventually exposed that he's a child of some Boston money, and his brother, played by Warren William, which this is fun as I'm looking through his IMDb, the Wolfman. Everybody was in the bloody Wolfman. Claude Rains, Bela Lugosi. I digress. So yeah, and our main, it's interesting. Like, it's fun because the protagonist really isn't straight defined. Like, you really want to relate to Polly Parker, played by Ruby Keeler, but it's really Joan Blondell who gets mistaken for Polly by the brother of Dick Powell, Warren Williams, and basically she's trying to run a con on him to get even with saying that all showgirls are chiselers, parasites, and gold diggers.
Right. Many of the backstage 1920s and 30s musicals have these kind of complicated storylines, and to the point that the cliche of one character turning out to be secretly wealthy would be parodied in later musicals, going back to that period, such as The Boyfriend or Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Well, I mean, this is half of Marilyn Monroe's filmography when you really stop and think about it. How to Marry a Millionaire, and of course, Some Like It Hot.
Right.
There's no Hidden Millionaire in Some Like It Hot. Just very progressive story if we really want to sink into that, because Jack Lemmon was pretty much resigned to his fate.
Well, there's a great write-up about that back in 1992 by Danny Peary in his Alternative Oscars book about looking at that story and character. But anyway, generally these backstage musicals, roughly, from my estimation, like the first 2/3 of the movie is mainly what you call the book material.
I know what you're getting to with that.
With a few songs, usually in the rehearsal context. And then the back third is given over to some big production numbers. And that's kind of the case here, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think...
But in terms of many of the other 30s musicals I've seen, such as... well, there is a bit more integration in the RKO, Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire musicals of song and dance than some, than talk, song, dance, and talk. And the backstage musicals are more weighted towards the end, like 42nd Street or Footlight Parade. And often in these Berkeley musicals especially, the big musical numbers are basically mini stories, almost like short films.
Yes, that's something that honestly takes me out of the movie.
Musical
this is not how theater works, and these are the actual. We're beyond rehearsal when this stuff happens.
Yes,
and it's like I loved We're in the Money.
Yeah,
I mean that was brilliant.
That's favorite.
But that's still. Aside from Ginger Rogers popping up somewhere, like when they're doing introducing all your showgirls who didn't get introduced in the Love Boat-esque credit sequence.
Yeah.
Throw the little circle, coin turns into a circle, and it's like, all right. The Catholic boat. So... Yes, but I will say that once you get to Pettin' in the Park, which that ain't pre-code. And then the last two musical numbers, like, dude, these are awesome music videos, but it just takes me right out of what you're trying to tell the story of.
Well, you have to go back to how musical theater evolved. Musical theater, of course, had its antecedents in such concepts as opera and ballet, The musical theater owed more to revues and vaudeville, especially early on.
Yes.
Musical numbers in some of the proto-musicals, the late 19th century, were largely there so they could get some women out to show some leg.
Well,
dance.
no. And again, thoroughly creeped out by finding out Billy Barty is the little kid in this one. Mm-hmm. Like, they knew he's stunted, so he can play baby and he can play little kid, and we're gonna do that pervy stuff too with him. So that, I get it. It's just like, but it's just like, if I go to see Les Miserables, I'm not expecting to, no, I don't, I'm in my seat. I don't get, is this going to be like a 4D experience? So the seat's going to move around the stage so I can get that overhead shot?
Right. Now, it's an interesting matter of musical theater at the time often didn't make much of an effort, if at all, to integrate the musical numbers with the plot.
Okay.
Whether it was a backstage musical or not. And
that makes total sense.
That didn't really start happening in American musical theater until the mid-1920s with Showboat.
Okay.
Now, let me go on. Showboat was one of the first, is in its own way, a backstage musical. And most of the songs are what we call diegetic, which means they are being performed for people in universe. Other musicals that you could call diegetic of more recent vintage would be something like Victor Victoria or the Blues Brothers, or pretty much any bio musical would be a diegetic musical.
Okay.
Some of Showboat is diegetic, and some of it is more characters just singing to each other as a means of expressing emotion. And so, but that was still a relatively recent development for film musicals. And we don't really get what's often considered the first musical to truly bring together story and musical narrative is usually considered to be Oklahoma, and that opened in 1940 on Broadway.
Yeah.
Although it's been pointed out that the early Disney musicals like Snow White also did much more than many previous musicals did to make the songs an active part of the storytelling.
Yeah.
Anyway, this does mean that in many of the 1930s movie musicals, you see, in terms of how they are staged, and that yes, they are much more cinematic than the perspective the actual theater audience would have. That's also part of the point. The movie compilation film That's Dancing, the 1985 spin-off of the That's Entertainment films.
So was that multiple studios for that, or was that solely MGM?
It was MGM, but they did include material from other studios, and an early stretch is just talking about the Busby Berkeley films at Warner Brothers, because, as is pointed out, many of the early movie musicals, most of which were diegetic, such as the film generally considered the first real talkie, The Jazz Singer, although the musical numbers are the only real sound part of the film, otherwise it's a straight silent. How
do you keep Neil Diamond so quiet for that long?
Okay, let me go on.
I'm sorry.
It points out that many of the early movie musicals that followed, beyond being diegetic, also tried too hard to replicate a theater experience to the point that they look unbearably stagey now. The second Best Picture Oscar winner and the first talkie to win was an MGM film from 1928 called The Broadway Melody. A lot of these 30s musicals have very similar titles, and a lot of them had spiritual follow-ups.
There's Gold Diggers 1937 and 39.
Yeah, and they're not direct sequels. They're just working on similar themes.
Yes.
But Broadway Melody is a dreadful movie. I have seen it. It's very stagey in terms of the musical numbers, and it's not very interesting to look at. It's like It's like what we now call a pro shot, the term for just filming the theater performance.
Oh, we've seen the Cinema Snob, or was it the yes, we saw the Cinema Snob tackle Gordon Herschel Lewis's attempts at that.
Magic World of Mother Goose, yes. But essentially, a lot of some of these early musicals play pretty much like a really dreary pro shot. Berkeley's innovation was that they should find ways to...
Broadway Melody won Best Picture?
Yes.
It's a 5.6 on IMDb.
Not many people like it at all. It is very dry.
It does qualify for 90 for Chill, the podcast. Okay. I could have gone with the Best Picture. Okay.
Yeah. You wouldn't have enjoyed it.
Well...
I mean, it is pretty dreadful. I can see where it might have thrilled people at the time, but...
Again...
Then, even a few years later, in later in the 30s, with one of MGM's other Best Picture winners of that period, The Great Ziegfeld, which is a tribute to Florence Ziegfeld, who was one of the great showmen of the early 20th century, and is a bio-musical with big production numbers. Again, that one suffers for being stagey most of the time. Aside from one number that's shot to look like it's all done in one take. I think it's really 2 takes, but they covered the scene. They're not very interesting to look at. There's this great old reference book I had back in the mid-90s called Movie Awards. They have listings of all major movie awards. And the writer was saying, what was it our grandparents thought was so impressive by women dressed like they're all figures on a giant wedding cake and just looking at them? Which is how the big set piece in The Great Ziegfeld does look.
I can go, this doesn't really have, again, I guess my Busby Berkeley complaint, aside from the fact that these are music videos, these aren't musical numbers, and honestly, I just still, like, despite what you've been saying looks bad, I want the theater experience.
No, you don't. That's what helped kill the movie musicals over the 50s and 60s, was being too stagey. There's a reason The Sound of Music is better known as a film than as a stage musical, because they were able to open it up.
I mean, alright, we're going to go right after the jug filter. It really comes to the end of the argument. Like, comic book movies are dead. And
wait, you haven't brought up why you want to bring up the Junk Filter podcast.
Oh, no, it was, and I am, actually. And I think it makes sense. What I like to see, I want to stay in the moment. I don't want this wide thing. And I mean,
you're experimenting with what Berkeley was doing. Was making music and dance on film truly cinematic.
Right, but that basically says don't go to the theater anymore.
Well, Footlight Parade kind of plays with that, because in that movie, the producer, played by James Cagney, comes up with the idea of, if people don't want to go see stage shows anymore, he can run short musical shorts that can be staged before the movie. In the climax of the movie, he has 3 of them open at once.
I think I'm familiar with that actually.
And again, no, it's not the sort of thing you'd see in real life. But in the 1930s, we're still really just finding our full potential for film at the time. We're experimenting with how exciting and dynamic it can be. And yes, it sometimes requires some suspension of disbelief. That's true. But
if I want suspension of disbelief, one, I'll watch professional wrestling or partake, available for bookings. But here's goes to the junk filter, because basically Jessica says we don't need comic book movies, we just need maximalist cinema.
Look, What Russ is referring to is a recent episode of the Junk Filter podcast hosted by Jesse Hawken. A recent episode featured him and a dear acquaintance of mine, Jessica Ritchie, making an interesting series of comparisons and contrasts between the 1960s roadshow musical run of films that were trying to capitalize on the success of Sound of Music, the biggest hit of its era, that ultimately sank the movie musical as a, well, you could say desirable genre for several decades afterwards. Not that musicals weren't produced, but generally not on the scale that
Pay Your Wagon.
Something like The Sound of Music had. This was in part due to... They drew a comparison between this and the currently shaky state of what some call the superhero industrial complex. The two films used to draw the point being one of the last of... Not one of the last, but one of the more notorious road shows, 1967's Paint Your Wagon, and the recent Black Adam movie from Warner Brothers. And I thought it was a very amusing argument, and one that is a comparison that many of us in the film community have been ringing up for a while. Too many eggs and too few baskets.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's just more like I'm thinking it's more just a we want something different argument, and I'm thinking like I don't see this as shaky as you guys are. You guys are just ready to you guys have the shovels ready. You're just waiting for a body.
Well, maybe we were.
Okay,
but maybe we had a point.
But then it ends though. It's like, well, you see, people are going to see Top Gun Maverick. People are going to see Elvis. We want maximalist cinema. It's like,
this is fair.
The 70s was not about maximalist cinema. It was raw, Scorsese, and just like, I wouldn't call The Godfather overly massive. Apocalypse Now, yes. I mean, directors got their chance to go into that stuff. But the best stuff is pretty grounded stuff. I'd rather we get another indie boom like the 1990s than Top Gun Maverick, which look like, I'm sorry, the movie posters, it's not the military industrial complex celebration that it is. The movie posters show me Miles Teller pretty much doing an exact pose of Anthony Edwards? No. The guy who played Goose on the piano. It's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want this rehash.
Well,
and when it comes to biopics, I don't want those either. Like Elvis, I've heard this. I know the story very well. I don't think you can fancy this up anything to make me interested in it.
I don't think it's a great film, but I enjoyed the Elvis film very much.
I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, like,
you're also making an unfair argument about the 1970s not indulging in maximalism.
No, I said we had Apocalypse Now. And Scorsese's done his. I mean, New York.
Near the end of the decade, yes.
Well, but I'm just saying,
and they're not the best examples to make, given that they were relatively unsuccessful.
Right, but Spielberg and Jaws, that's all about suspense. It's not really maximalist because we couldn't afford the shark to work.
But there's still a sense of scope and scale that he builds in that film, and even more so in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
But then you do get this massive alien ship at the end. I mean, but otherwise it feels very grounded.
But other films of the night, but there was still a big attitude for escapist, grandiose filmmaking in the 1970s. As much as people like to romanticize the gritty stuff that Coppola and Scorsese did, they loved the old-style maximalist filmmaking as much as anyone. They just didn't get a chance to try it out themselves until later. As you look through the 70s, there are many wholeheartedly old-fashioned movies that were huge successes on a grand scale. Patton was the 1970 Best Picture winner, and so And the biggest hit of the year was Love Story, a deeply corny romance. It's all about emotional torque.
But emotional torque, but it's not like, and now our grand, a grand number thrown in there. Or, fighter jets. Star Wars kind of ruined everything. Star Wars should have won Best Picture in 1977, but I'm not overly disappointed that Annie Hall did.
But let's think of other big hits of the 70s that went there. Certainly, the disaster movie cycle was huge success.
Yes, and I'm not a fan of disaster movies.
It's a style that I agree hasn't aged especially well, but you can see where the appeal was at the time.
Silent Running is like when I want sci-fi, I'll go to Silent Running, which has a large scale, but still pretty. It's one actor in effects, and I'll go with Rollerball is kind of maximalist. Dang it, I had another one. Dark Star.
It's true you can have a lot of smaller budgets.
Yeah, John Carpenter's early stuff, Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, like that. Like, I don't need all of these bells and whistles. I don't need that to feel something. Carpenter emphasizes that. I want great stories. Scorsese emphasizes that, and Coppola. It's like, I don't need something exploding. As somebody who loves violence, I don't need something exploding all the time.
But think of other big scale films. There were a lot of throwbacks to older styles of filmmaking in the 70s because much of New Hollywood was really generally considered the first generation to grow up on cinema.
Yes, they are my Super Mario brethren of that time.
Peter Bogdanovich did many homages to older forms and could work in very broad styles with films like What's Up, Doc, his screwball comedy throwback.
Yeah.
And he attempted a big old-fashioned 30s musical with At Long Last Love.
Yeah, emphasis, a lot of this, though, on attempted.
Well, you're not always going to succeed.
Well, I'm saying it that maybe that's not up their wheelhouse. Like, when you look at Scorsese, I'd say his most grandiose pictures would be probably The Aviator and Gangs of New York. I love Gangs of New York, but it's a deeply flawed picture. And I had no interest in The Aviator. Again, it's like, Howard Hughes. If that doesn't scream big, no, that's too big for my taste.
The 1970s was the closest time that a filmmaker like Ken Russell could have been considered mainstream.
True, but I like his.
Tommy was one of the biggest hits of 1975.
And I will argue that the Lair of the White Worm is a far better movie and a lot very quick, concise. Bagpipes, motherfucker. Bagpipes. maybe if the Who had some bagpipes. I imagine Keith Moon could rock that.
But the point is that there was plenty of big scale cinema in the 70s along the lines of what we're seeing now. Not necessarily the deepest kind of filmmaking, and not always and sometimes you'll swing for the fences and miss. But I think the 70s have a much more of a sweep than they're often given credit for.
Oh, there's more money to be made.
Like Edwards took a while, but he figured out how to make grand scale comedies like the Pink Panther movies work in the 70s. The James Bond movies entered their campiest period in the 70s.
Yes, and it's the worst period of James Bond movies.
But it was largely financially successful all the same.
Again,
and there are people who will stick up for it, the Roger Moore era especially.
Again, we're talking dollars is democracy. And again, to go back to The Simpsons, when will we learn? Democracy doesn't work. I mean, you can make more money on a low budget movie that's awesome than you can on maximalist cinema, and
But if maximalist cinema hits big, it hits Top Gun Maverick dollars big, that says something.
Yes, but if it misses, then you're merging with Disney.
What exactly did Fox do on an individual basis that led to it doing so poorly? I somehow don't think it was because they were making gigantic artistic swings.
No, Fox was not. I'm just saying you're going to end up... I mean, Disney is waiting for the next person to screw up.
Oh, I think of a lot of ways they've been screwing up lately.
But you have an entire backside infrastructure. The theme parks. The theme parks, ABC television. The fact that Fox just got... I don't know what Rupert Murdoch was doing so bad that he decided I cannot create any kind of content besides lies. I mean, maybe he was just going back to what he knew and what he made his money on. But I don't know enough about why Fox had to give up on all that stuff.
But another thing in favor of the maximalist approach is that, we've been worried so much about the death of the movie star movie. And
yes, we've discussed
some of these recent successes were very reliant on the charms and talent of individual performers. Some of them, of course, like Tom Cruise, are highly...
I think that's Tom Cruise...
beloved for all their flaws. Or up-and-comers like an Austin Butler type. I mean, he does carry that Elvis movie.
I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying,
in the 70s,
what else is Austin Butler...
movie star movies. Especially, that was part of the appeal of the disaster genre, was that they bring together all these stars, and it was a guessing game of who was going to croak. Even if they were top billed, you couldn't be guaranteed they'd make it to the end.
Yeah, the
old Jabutu's Bad Movie Dimensions. I think it was Ken Begg who wrote, part of the appeal of these movies was to see all your favorite classic movie stars fight it.
Yeah, but a lot of them are so past their prime. It's like,
it's true.
It's a joke that oh right, let's see her who held their breath for 2 minutes and then dies.
Shelley Winters and the Silent
Yes. I mean, I'm just saying, I'd rather... I think the problem with maximalist cinema is that, okay, when are we going to suspend logic?
I think we have no problem doing that.
I can watch an indie movie and not have to worry about that. A good one. Now, granted, indie movies are dependent that they keep making sense throughout of it, or it will fall apart. But why Harvey Weinstein? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. No, but when it comes to the movie star, I think it's a good thing that we don't, because we're then we're relying on Chris Pratt to be a movie star.
Well, that's the point.
That's what I'm saying.
Really you're not really able to develop a real persona when you're asking them to only parrot a few well-known IPs all the time.
Well,
I think that's might be part of the issue in his case.
Well, yeah, but then you bring up Passengers.
I think that had a lot of other problems going on.
Yes, but I'm just saying, Chris Pratt's going to be charming enough to warrant date raping, a long con date rape of Jennifer Lawrence.
It's definitely hard for those who have come up who came to fame in the superhero industrial complex to translate their talents to other roles.
Well, but here's the thing with Chris Pratt, though. We knew him as a comedy guy before that from Parks and Rec. Or, I guess you would say, Parks and Rec fans knew him as a comedy guy. It was brought up on Robot Chicken. where the nerd is being psychoanalyzed by J.K. Simmons, psychiatrist, after he tried. His mom found him and had to call an ambulance because he tried to figure out what it would be like to get a BJ from a Transformer. And before you say they're machines, now they do have gender. And then we find out he's actually Legion, bringing in Aubrey Plaza's character from that, and affection. Oh, you're Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Recreations, affectionately known as Parks and Rec. When I say affectionately, I mean by like a handful of people, because your rating sucked. I mean, so that explains Chris Pratt. It's just that he seemed too charming for his own good. But I don't know. I just like I really like it's just, if you want to scream support for maximalist cinema, obviously the Best Picture this year does that. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
I don't feel like I remember that one.
But you know what can I was pulling for the Banshees of Inisherin, so. Yeah. I don't know. Now, let's see. What I will say about Gold Diggers is that the themes still fit today, sadly.
Mm-hmm. You see this a lot with the pre-code 1930s films, especially.
Yeah.
Things don't change much.
Right. I mean, that's just a sad state of how we treat women. Perhaps that's the means why I keep ending up with showgirl type ladies. It's like somebody has to show them respect. Oh yeah, I'm the mark. So I see. There's a note I made. I was going to bitch about the kid in the music number, but it's hard to bitch about Billy Barty. It's still, again, that's some pre-code stuff, the entire petting in the park. And then everybody, all the ladies, we almost get to see some skin, definitely get to see some leg. And then we get to, how are we going to get these metal corsets off these women? And Billy Barty, again, kids in movies. I'm almost like, no, absolutely not. Couldn't Harry Potter taken place at college? Could you imagine Harry Potter, Revenge of the Nerds type stuff? Yeah, but again, I don't know. Here's something. Do we equate theater to the Muppets? Because that's what the Muppet Show was.
Muppets very much do come from that kind of vaudeville.
But I'm just saying, that's the only thing we had as kids.
Variety show tradition.
But yeah, that's the only kind of variety show we had as kids, really.
Yeah, if you were a real little kid and you didn't see the Last Trace, if you weren't quite old enough for the Last Trace.
To see Richard Pryor's, George Carlin, Laugh-In,
Donnie and Marie.
Right. No, I'm just saying.
There were a few stragglers in the early part of the decade because we didn't all have cable then.
Yes.
But the Muppet Show did work very much from the old traditions, and I think...
But that's what I'm saying. I think because of the old traditions, modern people just don't get it, including the Muppets now.
It's possible there has been that kind of break. I could talk on that subject of how so much of children's entertainment has become much more cut off from interacting with the rest of the world, including more adult forms of entertainment in recent decades, partially by design of something like Disney that wants to keep you in a bumble after a fashion. But if I'm to take it right, it's just that you preferred your musicals to simply be more integrated between story and songs, and unfortunately, you won't see a lot of that in a lot of 30s musicals.
No,
there are a few exceptions, but not. But
again, that brings me back to the Busby Berkeley getting big letters, and Al Dubin and Harry Warren get a joke made at their expense in the film.
Yeah.
I'm getting rid of that Warren and Dubin, and but the songs, I'm sorry, it's like we always keep Alan Menken and his partner Howard Ashman. I'm sorry. Hey, I once was it Ashman who died first?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. I'm sorry. Once it's like they were gone and it's now Tim Rice and Elton John, it kind of feels like we lost something bigger, and I don't have the immediate recollection. So we did lose something bigger. Thank you, Elton John. Take his sir away. Come on, Chuck. Oh, I will have to. Here's a legitimate question: lip syncing.
In general,
because they said in the introduction to the feature again, how Ginger Rogers was just having fun and got caught singing "Where the Money" in Pig Latin.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does lip syncing work then?
In many early 1930s musicals would record the musical numbers live on set. But in general, you just get a clearer sound, and it's easier to edit if you record the stuff in a studio, then do playback on the set, although the performer may or may not just mouth the words, but sing in and of themselves.
As long as the microphones don't pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sort of like that. A lot of 1930s musicals were recorded live. There was still a lot of experimentation that had to be done to get sound down in the first place. Part of the Singing in the Rain fictionalizes those kind of struggles.
No, and that one I like when you talk about, I need my music, I want my linear stories. No, it's kind of like that's the point. When you see, I'm sorry, because I know Fred Astaire, or was it Gene Kelly? I'm sorry. Gene Kelly doing Singing in the Rain. Well, of course, it's a movie about these musical numbers. There's your backstage musical stuff. So, yeah, it's very forgivable. I will say... Okay, no, all right.
I don't know what the situation was in this case, but it was not uncommon to do live singing in some of these earlier musicals, but I think by the end of the decade, playback became more common. Well, just because it was easier to throw together. There have been a few attempts to do live singing on set since then. Peter Bogdanovich did this with At Long Last Love, and Tom Hooper did this for at least parts of Les Miserables. But there aren't a ton of examples because, it's exhausting for performers.
Yes. So, I will have to mention Conan O'Brien flashbacks from this movie.
What do you mean?
I'm the ghost of the studio.
The Artie the Kendall the Ghost crooner skits. Yes.
This is another one. You didn't like that one? How about this one for the ladies? But it also tells me that there is something fascinating about black and white.
Yeah.
I mean, I love, and I think that's why I really I just love how everybody looks in Boardwalk Empire, because I think granted, it's color, but I think it pulls me back to that era where, with black and white, everything seemingly had to be done to perfection to look good.
Oh, yeah. But one of the problems they had one of the reasons colorization didn't become a mainstream practice was because they would often try and work from the actual colors the people were wearing on sets at the time. But since those colors were picked for how they'd shoot in black and white,
it's the famous,
they would look weird.
It's the famous meme of, and here's the Addams Family actual home.
Yeah.
In pinks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, black and white or color is as much of a tool as anything in visuals.
I'm kind of on the camp of unless you're doing something, dare I say, maximalist, don't shoot it in black color. Let's just do it black and white, man. Your story will carry it.
I don't know. There are plenty of films that you find interesting ways to use color that are relatively down to earth.
Yeah, but you know,
a symbolic purpose that you wouldn't find in black and white.
Well, yes, there is obviously great symbolic usage, i.e., Wizard of Oz. But I don't know. It's like I love the charm of Coen's basically replacing all colors in all movies with the technology, and I'm a big fan of The Man Who Wasn't There, where they basically shot the movie in color and then removed it all. So again, and then I made the $5 iTunes binge forgetting Llewellyn Davis movie, that's going to qualify for 90 for Jill, because there's no post scene. I would not think the Coen brothers would put a post scene. Yeah. Closest thing to a post scene was Pickles the cat dropping the lost finger into the dumpster where all the bodies end up on, the garbage boat all the bodies end up on in the Lady Killers. Which, yeah, definitely probably the worst Coen Brothers movie, but still a lot of fun. So, I mean, there's just so much stuff I like outside of these musical numbers. Like, I love the dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you could tell the difference between a Kevin Smith movie and a Tarantino movie based on, like, well, Tarantino's pulling all these references in his dialogue. You can tell that, oh yeah, he watched all, I mean, obviously you watch all the movies, and Smith is a little more like, what would you say with your buddies, and too much on focus, trying to create his own way of explaining great stuff.
Well, I think then if this one didn't quite do it for you.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, I'm good until, like, okay, and, well, this was 20 minutes too long. I mean, yes, that's a very beautiful violin made of people. But no! And then, I think we're almost to a wrap-up point, honestly. It goes back to the Hays Code. Was the Hays Code more about censorship or putting down counterculture?
It was really both.
Well,
I mean, they're pretty intimately tied up.
Yeah,
part of the reason the Hays Code came up was because it was felt that Hollywood was a profoundly immoral industry that was coming off of some terrible scandals, such as the Fatty Arbuckle scandal, and they felt that regulating content might help regulate the larger industry. In fact, one reason Busby Berkeley's career at Warner Brothers was curtailed by around the end of the 30s, I think, was because he got involved in a drunk driving arrest. And this was just as the Hays Code was starting to be very stringently enforced. And that may have factored into him being let go. Although he would do work for MGM later on in the 40s. But, yeah, they were trying to avoid a worse fate from higher government forces. It took a long time.
And the Catholics, I know they were a big part of that, why were they a big part of that? Because I thought that was the entire reason we didn't there was opposition to Kennedy was because he was a Catholic. I know that's at least what Grandma Polk said about Grandpa Henson. And I voted Democrat all the way until a Catholic was their nomination.
Well,
racism.
So if you find something like this hit or miss, you might, if you're looking for other pre-codes, maybe the screwball comedies are more your alley.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff to catch up on from the pre-code era.
Maybe look more at the comic vehicles for like Marx Brothers, especially the Paramount stuff, more than the MGM stuff later. Paramount stuff, maybe Mae West, because snappy dialogue, that's very common in that's practically a feature, not a bug.
Yes. Well,
in fact, many of the pre-codes that Criterion's programs featured, some of them are barely over an hour.
Well,
these can be very fast.
Keep in mind you're spending like the entire night at the cinema.
Yeah,
hence why the movies are
because you
A pictures, B pictures, newsreels, cartoons. Yeah, but yeah. So remember My Forgotten Man, great song.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't fault. Well, Penning the Park's just goes a little too long for my taste. Like, okay, you got maybe that's why Busby Berkeley got better billing than like. Where's the third verse? Mm-hmm. Anywhere? You got a third verse anywhere? Like, you're not Weird Al Yankovic. This is not supposed to be. Yeah. Sorry, so much UHF stuff did come to mind during this, but it's like that number is again like, why do you end it on such a down note? Everybody wins. Oh yeah, remember the Depression? What you have entered this movie theater to escape. Here's a retelling of where we're at.
Well,
like
plenty of maximalist films and even some of our great blockbusters have managed to work in fairly heavy themes and stuff.
Not right. No, there's a difference between heavy themes. That would have made a lot more sense in the middle of the movie. But to basically say, there's your happy ending. Now you have to pay for it.
I don't think it's plays quite that way.
Like, this is like, this isn't like Bad Lieutenant, or where what we knew despite he found his salvation, that he had to get shot down. That's it. I need Abel Ferrara to make a Gold Diggers movie. Like, it's like, but it really felt like we got punished for having a good time. Like, you didn't really tell us what this musical is about to begin with. I guess that's another problem of mine. I love the con games. I mean, that's what I really loved about the movie. Is like, oh yes, and maybe it's the professional wrestler in me, where I'm in a business of, yeah, I'm trying to screw you guys, mock you guys. Superman! The Spotify podcasters gave me a nice chance to see the warnings, but failed to miss it. So, regardless, let's just wrap her up. Thank you very much, The Poetic Critic, for coming on. Pre-code suggestions from you were the Marx Brothers, Mae West, Paramount stuff.
Yeah, Paramount, the early 30s Paramount stuff in general is really good, especially some of the horror stuff they did around that time.
Okay. You can follow what The Poetic Critic is watching on Letterboxd. I hope Miss Ritchie is not too offended for being pulled out on this one. Maybe follow a CatBus Russ a follow on Twitter, Jessica, and we'll be fine. But otherwise, anything else you want to promote?
Not today.
Okay. And as for me, you missed my wrestling talk, trying to get her back on the side. The Poetic Critic was at WrestleMania 1. Well, not at. It was good old days of short circuit cinema.
Closed circuit.
Thank you. I don't know. Professional wrestling, short circuits, kind of seems more right. Closed circuit television. Back at Robinson Memorial Fieldhouse in Peoria. I kind of miss the old days of field houses. You can follow what I'm watching on Letterboxd at CatBus. Well, the username is CM Darth. And that's Cookie Monster Darth or Cool Movies Darth. Anything that did not actually get popular with my fellow podcasters. And follow me on Twitter at CatBusRuss. Follow me on Mastodon at Russ Stevens at mastodon.social. And rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast apps. We're recording this on Spotify. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, I will reciprocate with a 5-star review. The username is The Scoops Daily. So, otherwise, I do need guests for the show. So, if you would, feel free to send an email to russthebus07@gmail.com. That's RUSSTHEBUS07@gmail.com. Offer me a movie, a theme, a director, an actor. Look, as I say, I prefer under 100-minute movies, but I can make anything work. So, I don't know if I can make Milos Forman work. But, usually directors have some small, brief little feature that somewhere in the filmography. And otherwise, thank you to Stacia Hardin for keeping an eye on my butt, and I hope you're doing the same to everybody else you touched in your life. And as always, I hope you're smothering that little one-eared angel Skimble Shanks. So, thank you to the Poetic Critic for coming back on the show, and thank you very much for watching. Listening. I got flagged on YouTube by Studio Ghibli. Maybe that's why I'm not giving Miyazaki the right treatment tonight. But thanks again for coming.
Can I hear a wahoo?